Okay, so I never really know where to begin really showing someone the server or the client-side coding. For me, when Laurent showed me Wakanda and what was going on the client side, I was confused. I couldn't figure out, well, how are you getting all of those objects and everything that Dave's created on the server side over to the client? So I figured, well, okay, I'll just pretend like I understand what Laurent's showing me and then try to figure it out later. And so, I went and I created a page and I threw a grid on it and bound it to a data source. And I figured, I'm just going to go look at the source code and figure this out. Well, I did that and it didn't help me very much. Because I got in there and I took a look at it, and I come from a .NET background, so I fully expected that my source code was just going to be polluted with all sorts of things. After all, I have a grid on the page that's bound to a data source, and I expected all sorts of behavior to be happening there, and tons of objects, and just to figure, just to build that out must be a lot of code. And I came to the source, and this is what I find, and I look at it and I'll, it's really just nothing but a series of divs with a whole bunch of data attributes. And then I look at it and try to figure out what's going on, and I see this at the bottom. I see, a call to the loader.js. Well, that is, in essence, on client side, the heart of how all these objects persist. So when my web page that I develop is handed off to the client, this is what they get as the initial stub. A little stub, and then a whole JavaScript library is called. And that JavaScript loader calls back to the server, and that server delivers basically an entire JavaScript library that is the definition of everything that this page needs to know to handle all the objects that I've put on the page, all the widgets. And then that loader at runtime starts tying up, building up the events, creating the events and the event handlers for me, and doing all that work automatically for me behind the scenes. And then things began to click. And for me, I really need to jump that far ahead just to figure out, okay, that's the environment that I'm working in. And then once the page is loaded, and it starts making all those AJAX calls, from that point on, I'm not doing postbacks. I'm designing on a per page basis in my app, a series of single page applications. My goal on the client side is not to do a postback in any way. I'm always just interacting on a per widget basis, communicating with the server. There's no screen refresh to the client or anything like that, and it's a nice, beautiful way of enabling a client interface that's not constantly redrawing. So that's the environment that I'm working with, and that's just kind of something to keep in mind as we go forward. So I'm going to start with this page, and this page has nothing on it that you haven't already seen. No code right now other than what I'm going to delve into and show you. I have a grid here with students. I have already bound my student class to it. I have a data source for students, a related data source for the attendance. And I have a JavaScript variable and data source on source find student. So one of the first things that I want to delve into is, it's probably the most complicated thing that you're going to deal with in client-side development is the different syntax. Now, what Dave's been showing you has been pretty straightforward, because when you're executing code on the server, it executes synchronously, and it can, because it has immediate response and everything, and it's multi-thread and all that. So it doesn't need to worry about latency that a client does. There's a slight difference in how you code things on the client. You can code things synchronously. But the problem with that is you run into a lot of instances where, let's say I did a query and that was a synchronous query. Well, at the point that it makes the call to the back end to do the query, if that took 15 seconds, the user would literally be blocked from being able to do anything else on that page during that time. And that's not ideal. So most of the code that you'll write on the client end is asynchronous. And I'll show you the basic syntax for how that works out here. So on this page, I have a find screen. We're going to use this find dialog. And I'm going to go through in this button script all of the different ways, the different syntaxes that we use to do the same thing. I'm going to execute basically the same query over and over again, but step through all the different ways that this is formatted. And at the end of this, it's probably the most conceptual part of the client side. Most client side code that you write, it's just incredibly easy to do, especially if you've tied things up properly on the back end and you've got away from the fear of using things like alias attributes to kind of smash down the complexity of your class, so that what you're dealing with on the client side is just a very natural, easy to get to and easy to access all the different parts that you would normally be working with. I'm going to open up this script here. Okay, and the first way that I'm going to build this query is pretty straightforward. I'm going to put up a little disclaimer right now, and this is mostly for the Wakanda engineering team. But I'm going to lie to you a little bit right now. And what my lie is really not germane to what I'm going to teach you, and I'll tell you the lie at the end of this page. Okay, so I build up a query string, and I think this is similar to what Dave's been showing you. I just concatenate a bunch of values, and I embed my JavaScript variable in there. And I call source.student.query. Now, source is my data source. That's the global object that's propagated to me. You know, when that loader kicks in, it goes and pulls from the server delivers to me this entire object. And it's built out all these data sources for me. So I have a whole library of JavaScript objects at my disposal on the client. Source is what keeps track of all of my data sources. So source.student.query. Query is just a method to call on a data source. And I pass it my query string. Now, this syntax right here is what we'll call synchronous. So when I run it, it will block the user while that query is executing. And I'm just going to go in real quick here. That's not what I want. This page. And I'll run it, and I'll type in brown. Oh. Might help. Oh. Okay. And it did the query. Very fast, return results. But a couple things about that. You know, that particular syntax, it ran it sequentially. So it could have blocked me, right? If that query took a long time, the user would not have had any kind of ability to do anything else on the page during that time. And also, I couldn't have handled any possible error condition. Basically, I'm just telling it, do the query, and what happens, happens. What happened was it sent the query to the server. The server did the query, put the results into the entity collection that underlies my student data source, and then automatically told the data source to advise any widgets on my page that need to reference that. Okay, I'm going to just comment this line out. And now let's take a little bit a look at another way of calling this same thing. Now in this case, it's the same source.student.query, and I'm passing the same query string. But I'm passing what we're calling here an option block. Okay, and an option block is a number of things that we will pass to our method. And it's based on this signature that, that Wakanda knows to execute this query in an asynchronous fashion. And in this particular case, I pass it the query string. I give it an onSuccess. And for the onSuccess here, I'm giving it a function. And in that function, the only thing I'm having it do is bring up an alert that says success. I could also pass it an onError. I don't need, if I'm not going to do anything, I don't even need this. All these things are optional. But the existence of this option block will dictate that the query be executed asynchronously. So I'm going to just go in and run it and make sure that it behaves properly. Okay. And I get my success alert. Very good. Okay, let's comment that back out. Let's take this one step further. Okay, here's an example of a query. Now I'm going to do a query with a placeholder. Syntax is just a little bit different. My query string gets full name equals and then a :1, which is a parameterized thing. Now in this case, when I want to pass use placeholders, I actually do need to use an option block. There is no sequential way of performing this. So my option block is going to take on the additional attribute here of params. And params takes an array of my parameters. You know, this would just be a common delimited list of items if I had, you know, :2 in here, or, you know, if I had additional criteria that needed it. And again, I have an onSuccess function, an onError function. These are optional. But I'll just run this and make sure that everything still works. Okay, good. We're still in business. Okay, so some methods of doing a query actually require it. And in fact, often you may have commands that require the option block type of syntax. Okay, in this next example, I'm going to force an error. I'm changing my query string to be something that's impossible. The server should recognize that and throw an error. I'm passing my parameter in like before. I have an onSuccess event. I've got a function now defined for my onError. And in this case, my onError routine is simply going to change the border color to solid red on my query box. It does that through jQuery. jQuery is built in as part of Wakanda. You can access it without having to load it yourself. It's just naturally part of the language. So this is the object on my form, and I'm changing the CSS. I'm going to put the focus back in that field and highlight whatever it was they typed. I'm going to save that and run that. Reload. Now, it doesn't really matter what I put in here since it's completely invalid. I'm going to search, and it ran my routine. Okay. Now, here's the confusing part. If you're executing asynchronous code, you can't always be guaranteed that the environment, the state of the web page, is necessarily the same state it was at the time that the query was executed. If I run a query that's going to take 15 seconds and I've immediately handed return back to the user, they could have easily done something that would have changed the state so that when the server actually returns the value and runs the function that I supplied for my onSuccess, it may not be valid. If my onSuccess is meant to increment a field that the user may have already incremented themselves, well, you can see that things could get out of sync. Well, for just about every command that you'll run in your client development, anything that calls back to the server in some way, there's an optional parameter that you can supply, and that's what we just call user data. And it's tacked on to whatever the other parameters might be part of the command you're executing. So in this case, I created an object called user data, and I just gave it a couple properties. I gave it a name, Dan, and an on-air property that I defined my own function. And that function is similar to what we did last time, except this time I'm going to set the whole background color of the field to red, focus, and select it. And now I'm going to force my air again. And now in the on-air call, I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to bring up an alert, and I'm going to use event.userdata.name. So the user data that I pass down here as part of the query just gets passed through. And user data could be any object that you want. And it just gets passed through, and it comes through as part of the event that gets thrown when the data is returned or an error is thrown. So now if I come run this, reload, doesn't matter what I type, Dan and red. Pretty cool. So it's probably the hardest thing about the client-side development that you're going to have to factor into the equation. And if you can just get a handle on that, everything else is going to be really, really easy. And it provides, conceptually, it provides a very interesting aspect. It lets you, it'll take this code right here, it lets you set up how I want to handle this in a very generic way. And maybe, depending on user state or different things, based on what I might pass as user data, maybe for me as a user, the outcome of the error is different than for a different person. It can all be dependent on the type of functions that I hand through to the handling call. So it lets you kind of change and redirect the outcome of your calls based on the user data that you pass. But user data would normally be the place where you capture whatever the state is about the user's page that you need to pass along to the functions that are ultimately going to get called upon success or on error. And that's the hardest part. So for this next stage, oh, yeah. Someone was going to call me on that. So the lie is this. Yeah, the lie is that when working with data sources, even when you call things in a synchronous fashion, data sources make all of their calls asynchronously. So, that first example that I gave you, that would not have blocked the user because I made this call through my source.student.query. Okay, and that's one of the niceties about data sources. They make working with Wakanda so easy. They give you so much capability, and they try to take care of you in so many ways that I just didn't want to tell you that up front because it didn't illustrate the point very well. But it kept the engineers from yelling at me. Okay. I'm going to start by trying to create a real-life example. And let's say that I'm a registrar of students, and or I work for the registrar, and that registrar wants me to design a page, and I'm going to just create a new page here. Okay. So as usual, I'm gonna start with a grid. I'm gonna drag my grid over. And I'm going to drag session up.
What's this page supposed to do?
Oh, thanks, Dave. So the registrar came to me and said, yeah, I need a page in which I can, we need to create next year's set of classes. And the way that we do that is we typically look at previous year's examples, sets of classes, and we find the one that best matches, and we want to copy 1 year's set of sessions into the new year. And that's what they wanted, so I'm going to create an interface to accomplish that. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a grid, and I'm going to spend just a little time working with it because we're going to be looking at it for a while. So I'm going to move some of these things around. I'm going to move the code up, move my semester up. Oh, what happened to my code? Oh, here we go. Code, semester, course. I'm going to add a thing here. I'm going to add a teacher. And for teacher, I'm going to say that's class teacher dot full name. Okay. Move my teacher up. Maybe location up. Schedule down. We have to look at this for a while, so I thought I'd make it nice. I'm going to resize some of these things real quickly. Okay. We'll just work with that. And let's just run it, make sure everything's tied up here. Okay. Good. Okay, well, clearly the registrar isn't going to want to deal with all the sessions in my table at once. They're going to want to have some kind of combo box that they can reduce this selection down so that they can find what they're looking for. So I'm going to drag a combo box onto my form. Here we go. And let's see, I'm going to need an array for that. So I'm going to create a new array, data source array, and I'm going to rename that semester array, if I could type. And the attribute I'm going to want the semester. Okay. Get rid of the label. And move it over, and I'm going to move my semester array into that. As my source in, as we saw earlier. Okay. Well, I clearly need to populate this array with something. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to select just the background here and go to the events for my overall page. I'm going to go into the onload event for my page, and I'm going to do a little coding here. I'm going to say ds.session, session dot distinct values. Semester. And then on success, function event, you will do. Okay. Okay, so on the success of this distinct value call, because it's going to be an asynchronous call, When it succeeds, I want to have it declare an array, or go get the values actually into my array. I'm going to say event.distinct values. So event is basically the object that's passed to my call here when it succeeds. So, and off of that are the distinct values from the function that I just called. I'm going to say semester array is equal to that. And then for var I equals 0 from I less than my array dot length I plus plus ding 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 ding. Okay. And then there is just going to be semester array I gets semester my array I. That looks right, right? Okay. So, yeah, the distinct value call is sent to the server. Server fills it out, calls back the function that I passed to it to run when it succeeds. And in that function, I take the values that are attached into the event, the distinct values. I put that into my array. And I loop through that array to create an array of objects that have one attribute, semester. I've just changed, though, the JavaScript array. So I need to advise my source that change has happened so it can tell all the widgets about it. And that's quite simple. Just say source.semester_array.sync. And you'll get real familiar with that function. Okay, I'm going to come back in. I'm going to run this. And now I have a pop-up filled out with all of the distinct values of all of the semesters. Excellent. Well, now we need to do something with that, don't we? We wanted to actually do some work. I'm going to come back to my page, and I'm going to go, OK, well, I clearly need to attach some kind of event. So I'm going to click on the object here and see what kind of events are at my disposal. On blur, that's not right. On focus, no, no, no. Ooh, on change, yeah, that looks nice. That would probably work, except it's not really the most appropriate place for my code because I don't really want to attach the behavior specifically to the action of the dropdown. Instead, if I come down here and I go to my data source, well, data sources have events themselves. And here I have a couple different places that I could actually attach this event. I have an onCurrentElement change. That sounds appropriate. I also have can add event here directly on semester change. And this would be a little more obvious if if my data source was listening to more properties of this array. I only have one here. So in this case, I'm just going to add it to my onCurrentElement change. Okay. And the query for this is going to be pretty simple. Get my hands on the right keys. Source.session.query. And semester is equal to plus source.semester array dot semester plus dun, 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 dun. Okay. We've seen this query before. Here's something a little bit interesting. Source.semester_array, which is based on an array, I'm referring to semester directly. And that's, I think we've discussed this earlier. Your data sources are doing so much. They're tracking so many things. It's not only are they tracking an underlying entity set, an entity collection, but they're also tracking the current element, and they've propagated it up to this level that I can just directly access each attribute as though it were just a single item. So this will show me the semester for whatever the currently selected thing is. And that's that. I'm going to come in and run it. Reload. And now when I choose my pop-up, very nice. I did very little coding so far to make that happen.
Big enough, very little coding.
Yeah, you'll recognize a theme with me. Don't like to code too much. Okay. Now, let's not forget what our goal was. Our goal is to be able to copy one session of data into another one. So I'm going to come back. And to do that, I mean, I'm going to come to the model and take a look at the model. Let's see. Okay. And Dave was nice enough to have provided for me a method. And he created a method called copysemester, and it's a class-based method. I'm going to open that up, take a look at it real quick. Copysemester requires two parameters, a from semester and a to semester. And it does a query, finds all of the sessions that are based on the from semester, puts it in here. If it didn't find anything, it's going to send an error up to us. If it did find some, it's going to go through each one and create a new session. Just copy the data over, with the exception of semester, where it's going to set it to the value that we pass in, and it's going to save. All pretty straightforward. And all that code right there will be executed on the server, not on the client. So now that we've seen that, what we need to do is come up with a way of executing that function, and gathering up the data for it. So I'm going to come back to my form. I'm going to add a new text input here. And I'm going to go to my properties, and I'm going to say its source is semester 2. I tab, and over down here on the left, I created a new data source for me called semester 2. And I'm going to just change the text here, copy 2. And I'm going to need a button to just make sure that when we're ready, it will do the copy. Copy. OK, I'm going to add an event to this, an on-click event. OK, now I need to handle the bulk of what's going to happen here. I need to call the method. And what I want to do is I want to take the current selected element in the pop-up and create a new set based on what I type into my field. But whatever I type into my field, I want to be back in the right sort order. So I'm going to write quite a bit of code now that will do that. But as you'll see, not a lot of that code is really necessarily Wakanda stuff. So I'm going to, let's say, I'm going to write a compare function. It's going to help us a little bit down the road here. I'm going to say that's equal to function A. I don't. All right, pretty simple. If A dot semester is less than B dot semester, return minus 1. If A dot semester is greater than B dot semester, return 1, else return 0. Now this is just a JavaScript function that's going to be used as part of our sort in a little bit. I'm going to create a function right now that is my onSuccess function. And this is one that I'm going to pass to my onSuccess event when I ultimately call the routine. We're keeping this real. We're doing this live. So I'm going to say var new semester is equal to, I'm going to create a new object here, new semester with my semester 2 value. And I'm going to push that onto my semester array. Okay? Just yell if I type something wrong here. And I'm going to sort my array based on my compare function. If you know JavaScript, then that's not at all confusing. If you don't, then it's very confusing. But and then I'm going to select index of new semester. Fine. Oh, yep. Sorry. Select where. Yeah, you're welcome to close your eyes and think about Tebow doing his fiesta dance while I type this. Okay. So, I just push, create a new object, semester, with the value that the user is going to type in. I push that onto my array. I sort it into my array. I figure out where it ended up in the array. I tell my data source to go to that position. And since I both modified it and changed its sort, I need to tell the data source to sync up its data and tell everybody else. And just to be inelegant, I'm going to bring up an alert that says session copied. Just, oh, yeah. That's fine. Okay? And if I got that all entered correctly, no? Oh, yeah. That would help, wouldn't it? Okay, you're right. I need to use this now. So I'm going to add a couple lines here. I'm going to say var semester from is equal to my source dot semester array dot semester. That's what I'm going to copy from. And now I'm going to make the call to Wakanda. I'm going to say ds dot session dot copy semester. And for the onSuccess, rather giving it an anonymous function, I'm going to say onSuccess function, the one that we just created above. Close that out. I'm not going to give it an on-here handle. I trust that this is going to work. And I'm going to say semester from and semester 2. And that's it. So it's really just a couple lines of Wakanda code. And save, and let's see if that worked. Refresh. Okay, I'm going to choose 94 Spring, and I'm going to enter 1992 test. Actually, let's say test, tab, and copy. I got my session copied. My pop-up automatically changed to test, and the data was selected as 1992 test. I can switch to a different one, come back, boom. I got the right selection of records. Okay, that's excellent. Now my registrar comes to me and says, well, what we really need to do is we really need to assign a new teacher to some of the sessions. So we need a capability of doing that. I say, okay, we can handle that. So I'm going to add a new combo box to my form over here. And I'm going to go back to my data sources. I'm going to switch over to model, and what I really want here is the teacher. So I'm going to grab teachers and drop it right on there. I want that to be my source in. And notice that it created a new data source for me for teacher. It also pre-filled in all this stuff. And if I left it as is, if we looked at the pop-up, it would just concatenate all of these different things up here. And I don't really need that. What I really want is just their first name and their last name. I'm going to get rid of all these other things. So really, this widget, I only want it to display their first name and last name. And I can get rid of the label. All right. Boom. Boom. OK, good. Now I need a little button, because what we really want to do is copy the currently selected teacher down into the currently selected session. And I'm going to open up here just my media library. Media library is a bunch of icons that you have at your disposal that you can just pull from any of these. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. Try to find something that looks all right. Let's take this green. Oh, dear. I'm going to take this green icon and drop it on top of my button. Resize my button down. Ah. Get rid of the library. Oh, really? Okay. And on my on-click event for that, I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to say source.class_teacher.set gets source.teacher. And then source.session.save. That's it. I'm going to save this, come back in, and run. Refresh. And now when I select an item here, let's say Ira Snyder is the current teacher. If I come in and select Dennis Adams, and I tell it to drop down, the value changes. And it's automatically saved. I can switch to a different one. That was 91 Spring, and come back to 91 Spring, and we're still Dennis Adams. All that communication, all that update handled really quite simply. And how are we on time?
No, we're out of time, I'm sorry.
Shoot.
We have more things to show, but we're running out of time, and they got to switch the room pretty soon. So hopefully that was informative.
Thank you.
Feel free to download it. Go ahead and try it yourself.